Howdy, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Rebuilding Real Life. I'm Mike, and last week I talked about what I wish I had known when real life came back after treatment or after a meeting or after you pray. Today, I want to talk about honesty. So I've always considered myself an honest person. So I didn't really expect honesty to become one of the more complicated parts of my recovery, but it has. I don't like to lie. Complete honesty is something that I value as a person. And when I came out of treatment, I thought it would be that straightforward. Tell the truth about what I had done, admit if I was struggling, stop hiding, stop making excuses. Early in recovery, a lot of honesty really did look like that. It meant like being honest about my using and my behavior and the damage I had caused and the ways that I had avoided my responsibility. Those truths were difficult, but in some ways a lot easier to identify. Something happened, I did it, and I needed to own it. But as recovery has kind of continued, honesty has really become more nuanced. It's not always about admitting that I thought about drinking or getting high. Sometimes I'm angry, afraid, or lonely, overwhelmed, or frustrated. And the feeling may be real, but what I believe it means may not be true. So now I have to ask whether something is a fact, a fear, an interpretation, or just a raw reaction that needs a little bit of time. I have to decide whether the person involved needs to hear it right now, or whether I should process it with my sponsor or my therapist or recovery friends, or whether I need to pray and let the feeling settle a little bit before I speak. Honesty in recovery has changed from simply admitting the truth to learning how to handle the truth responsibly. Sometimes I am telling the truth, but at the same time, I'm also hoping the truth will speed up someone else's healing. So when I came home from treatment, I really felt like something had changed in me, and I wanted that to prove something. And I mentioned this a little bit last week, but I still knew I had a lot of work ahead of me. At the same time, I wanted people closest to me to see that change and begin rebuilding with me. I needed some evidence that there was still hope. So just for a little context, my wife and I have been separated and we're working on rebuilding our marriage. So when I talk about wanting her to be ready, I mean ready to begin rebuilding with me on the same timeline I was. And I wasn't asking for everything back, and I was just asking for movement. I wasn't trying to get my wife to forget everything or pretend that everything was suddenly okay. I just wanted her to start the process of forgiving me and to begin trusting me again and maybe let me back into her life just a little bit. And the desire made sense to me. I had gone to treatment. I was doing IOP. I was sober, and I am serious about changing. But underneath some of the honest things that I was saying at that time, there was another message that I didn't fully recognize. And it was, I'm ready to start rebuilding, so I need you to be ready too. And I think wanting reassurance is human, but it can still turn into pressure. So I wasn't necessarily being dishonest, but I was hoping that my honesty would help me control how quickly that relationship moved forward. And it brings me to this conversation I had with my wife a few weeks after I left treatment. I was in the fish house and we were going back and forth a lot. And I told her, forgiveness is a choice. And she looked at me like I was kind of crazy. And at the time, I believed forgiveness could begin with a choice. I wasn't saying that choosing forgiveness would erase the hurt or restore trust overnight or make everything normal again, because I know that's not true. But I was hoping she would choose to begin the process with me. But I was ready for rebuilding before she was. And about 6 months later, so a few weeks ago or a month ago or so, we were just sitting around and talking, and she said those same words to me. Forgiveness is a choice. And I remember stopping her and saying, like, what changed your mind? Because I said that to you months ago. And she said something really crazy to me. She said, I know, but we are on different timelines. I couldn't understand it then, but I do now. And that like really hit me because the sentence had not changed. Her ability to receive it had. So it just proved to me that I don't get to decide when she should be ready. So I may have been right about the sentence, but I was wrong if I believed that I had the right to decide when it needed to become real for her. So the hardest truth is not whether forgiveness is a choice, right? The hardest truth is admitting why forgiveness and rebuilding are necessary in the first place. So the biggest truth that I've had to face in my recovery is that much of what is happening in my marriage and my family are a direct result of my decisions and actions. That doesn't mean that there haven't been extenuating circumstances. It doesn't mean that I've never been hurt or misunderstood or excluded or treated unfairly. And it doesn't mean that every disagreement is completely my fault or that other people are allowed to behave however they want. But at the core of why trust was damaged and why relationships need to even be rebuilt are my choices and my behavior. I lived in addiction and unhealthy patterns for a long time. The people around me have years of experience with that version of me, and I only have about 10 months of recovery to show them. So I can acknowledge that their behavior sometimes hurts me without using their behavior to avoid responsibility for what I have caused. And part of owning that is accepting that honesty cannot only be something I say. It has to become visible in how I continue to live. It has to become a consistent behavior. And 10 months feels like a long time for me, but a short time for someone who I was hurting for years. Honesty without ownership can become blame, and I can't rebuild my life while continuing to make everybody else responsible for how I feel. So even while I'm doing the right things, I still have to watch how badly I want everyone to think I'm doing great. Image management does not always look like telling an obvious lie. Sometimes I think it looks like not mentioning a difficult day because I don't want someone to attach too much meaning to it. For example, I might worry that if I admit I'm struggling, someone's going to think he should be doing better by now, or like maybe his recovery is not as strong as it looks. Should we be worried about him? The people in my recovery circle, they don't know the old Mike. So I'm not really afraid that they'll suddenly recognize the person I used to be, but I can still be afraid that one honest struggle will become a verdict on my entire recovery. And that can make me hesitate or soften what happened or choose who I talk to partly based on who is least likely to become concerned. Sometimes image management is not pretending to be someone else. Sometimes it's trying to control how much meaning people attach to one difficult moment. So I have to choose intentionally the right place for the truth. Honesty doesn't require telling everyone everything, but it does require making sure the truth reaches somewhere safe and safe enough to help me. One of the strengths of my recovery is I don't have only one person. I have a sponsor. I have recovery friends. I have a gratitude group. I have a therapist, my wife, and other people that I trust. And I've learned that it isn't fair or realistic to bring every struggle to one person and expect them to carry that. that puts too much pressure on them. And it doesn't help me either, because one person can't be the right source of support for every situation. My sponsor helps me stay grounded in recovery principles, helps me examine my behavior and think about how I need to show up. But detailed marriage issues may need to go to my therapist. He's a licensed professional who's trained to help with those situations. He can help me untangle my complicated fears or reactions or relationship patterns. And then my recovery friends can help me with loneliness or shared experience, a different perspective, or being of service and getting out of my own head. Sometimes another person may have their own painful experience that makes a particular subject harder for them to hear objectively. That doesn't make them wrong or unsupportive. It just means that I need to discern where to take it, and that's part of honesty, I think. The question is not, did I tell everybody? The question, I think, should be, did I bring this somewhere where I can be honest, or somewhere that's healthy, or to someone that's capable of helping me? Because I don't always need someone to fix the situation. I need someone outside my own head to help me see it honestly. So when I do bring a struggle to the right person, they can help me see that the situation may not be as negative as I'm making it, because they can see what I can't while I'm inside whatever feeling I'm going through. Sometimes who I bring it to reminds me to just keep doing the next right thing, or go to a meeting, or to be of service, maybe to pray, or to give the situation time. It can really get me back to reality before I react. The point is not that they always make the problem disappear. The point is that I no longer have to rely on my own interpretation while I'm emotional or afraid or lonely or overwhelmed. And I think at least one person needs enough of the picture to know how I'm really doing. Because honesty gives other people enough truth to help me separate what happened from the story my mind is building around it. But there is a place where honesty still feels really dangerous to me, and that's with the person who actually knew the old version of me. My wife the other day asked me whether there was ever anything I was afraid to be honest with her about. And I really had to admit that sometimes there is. Not because I'm hiding like some major secret, but because normal life can get really heavy. Traffic gets under my skin. Parenting can be really frustrating. And I can feel overwhelmed or irritated or lonely or even worn down. And sometimes I am afraid that if I bring those things to her while they are still really raw, she'll think, there's the old Mike, or he's not ready, he can't handle normal life. So what I'm learning is not to pretend the struggle never happened, but also not to immediately place the full emotional weight of it onto her. Instead, I might process it with my therapist or my sponsor or recovery friends. Then I can come back later and say, hey, earlier I was struggling. I worked through it, but I was afraid to tell you because I thought you might see it as proof that I'm not ready. So the goal, I think, is not to prove I never struggle. The goal is to show that when I do struggle, I know how to respond differently. And here's a tricky honesty angle that I hadn't thought of until I started writing out this episode. But I'm also learning that if I want other people to feel safe hearing the truth from me, I have to become someone who can safely hear the truth from them. There have been plenty of times when the old version of me did not handle difficult honesty very well. I would become defensive, or I would shut down, or argue, explain, or just make the other person regret telling me what they felt. So even though I want people to be honest with me, specifically my wife, I have to understand that honesty may still feel dangerous to her also. I can't demand that she open up simply because I believe I am ready now. My job is to keep showing her that I can listen without punishing her for what she says. I can hear something painful now without immediately making it about my intentions. I can let her experience be real even when it's difficult for me to hear. That's another kind of trust that has to be rebuilt over time. I can't ask someone to trust my honesty while refusing to become a person who can safely hear theirs. So how does faith for me fit into all this? It's teaching me that prayer isn't about asking God to make other people respond the way I want. It's asking him to show me his will for me today and give me the ability to carry that out. It would be really easy for me to pray something like, God, please make this person forgive me, or please make them trust me, or please make them understand that I have changed. But even though those type of prayers, they do come from a real place of hurt or hope, they can still be another way of trying to control the outcome. And I think the kind of prayer that I need is more like this. Hey, God, please keep showing me what your will is for me today and give me the ability to carry that out. Amen. And it's that simple. And I think maybe sometimes his will for me today is just to tell the truth. Maybe it's just to stay quiet long enough to listen. Or maybe it's to make an amends without expecting anything back. Maybe it's to call someone or go to a meeting or be of service or just take care of my family and stop trying to defend myself. My faith helps me focus less on making another person's change and more on me becoming the person God created me to be. And the more I live like that person, the more I begin to feel like myself again. And then forgiveness and trust will still matter to me, but they won't be the thing that determines whether I'm okay. Faith doesn't guarantee that I'll get the outcome I want. It just gives me a way to keep living honestly and faithfully, even when the outcome is still uncertain. So I want to close with this, because recovery is teaching me that honesty doesn't have to mean immediate honesty or brutal honesty, careless honesty, or even have it be directed at everybody. Complete honesty does not mean every thought deserves an audience the moment I have it. Sometimes I really have to ask whether what I'm feeling is a fact, a fear, an interpretation, or just a raw reaction that needs time. Sometimes honesty means saying the hard thing, and sometimes it just means processing the hard thing before I say it. And that's where the discernment comes in. Sometimes it means taking it to my sponsor or my therapist or recovery friends or God first. And sometimes it means telling the truth clearly, continuing to live differently, and accepting that I do not control what happens next. So here's what I want you guys to do is, before you share something difficult this week, pause and ask yourself 3 questions. Is this a fact? Is this a feeling? Or is this an interpretation? Am I bringing this to the person most capable of helping me? And am I sharing this to be honest and connected, or am I hoping it will make someone respond the way I want? And you don't have to answer those questions perfectly. I just want you to slow down long enough to notice what is driving you. Then decide whether you need to speak, process it somewhere safer first, or pray for direction before doing anything. Honesty is not only about getting the words out. Sometimes it's about becoming honest with myself before I decide where those words belong. So I'm learning that honesty is not proving I'm fine. It's not saying every thought out loud. It's owning what is mine, bringing the truth to the right place, and then living in a way that supports my words and asking God to help me become the person he made me to be. no matter how anyone else responds. That is honesty without pressure, and that is part of rebuilding real life. That's all I got for today, guys. I hope you have a good one. See you next time, y'all. Not perfect, just willing.